We read in Parshas Balak, Vayar Balak ben Tzipor, and Balak the son of Tzipor saw, is Kol Asher Osa Yisrael le'Amori, all that Yisrael did to the Amori. It's interesting. We find there were two giants. One giant's name was Sichon Melech Amori. That was the first giant. The other giant was Og Melech HaBashan. Og, the king of Bashan. The first giant to be killed was Sichon Melech Amori. He was the first giant that was killed by Moshe. The second giant that was killed by Moshe was Og Melech HaBashan. Balak, the son of Tzibus, all that Yisrael did le'Amori. Amori is the first giant. Now, why did Balak summon and commission Bilam to curse the Jews? Because who were the protectors initially of all the nations of Canaan? The two giants. As a result of this, if the giants are killed, who will be the protector? Physical might cannot stand up against the Jew. Because we see you can't have anybody more physical in power than Og and Sichon. So if they're able to be victorious over giants, we stand no chance. Therefore, we have to approach them another approach, unconventional approach, which is to be cursed by Bilam, who's the prophet of the nations of the world. But if that is the case, it says, Balak, the son of Tzipor, saw what Yisrael did to the Amori. Amori is the first giant. Sichon Melech Amori. But Og Melech HaBashan wanted to say, what about the second giant? Well, we speak about the Amori. What about the second one? So evidently, what we did to the second one, that wasn't the problem. It's what we did to the first one. Also, was bothering me, usually whenever the word Yisrael is used, it's always B'nai Yisrael. V'yar Balak ben Tzipor is Kol Asher Osa B'nai Yisrael Amori. But yet it says Yisrael. The next pasuk verse says V'yoger Moav B'nai Om Ma'od Ki Rafu. They were terrified, overwhelmingly frightened because of the people, because they're numerous. V'yokotz Moav B'nai Yisrael. Moav were frustrated, disgusted with themselves because of B'nai Yisrael. So Yisrael is B'nai Yisrael. But yet Balak, he had seen what Yisrael did to the Amori, not B'nai Yisrael. Is Moshe B'nai Yisrael? Is Moshe Yisrael? Why is it Yisrael? So I was thinking, first in regard to the giants. Now, how did Og Melech HaBashan, how did he die? How was he killed? Initially, the Gemara tells us that the camp of Israel, from end to end, was 12 miles. It was a 12-mile expanse. That was the camp. So the Gemara tells us in Brochos that Og, the king of Bashan, he picked up a mountain, which was 12 miles by 12 miles, and he put it on his head. And he walked with it, and he says, how am I going to destroy the Jewish people in one moment? I'll take this mountain, which is 12 miles by 12 miles, and just drop it upon them. And they'll be crushed under the mountain. So, carrying such a mountain for a man like Og, it's something very heavy. So he took the mountain, he supported the mountain on his head. So what did Hashem do? Hashem sent insects, ants, and they burrowed around the area where his head was. So what happens if you have such weight weighing down on, and the center is softer, so the center gives. So what happens? So the mountain, actually, his head became wedged in the mountain. So after he's carrying such a heavy load, even for a giant, 12 miles by 12 miles, so what does he try to do? He tries to pull the mountain off his head. He can't pull the mountain off his head. And the Gemara quotes a pasuk, a verse in Tehillim, Psalms. David says, Shine Rishom Shibarta. You've smashed the teeth of the evil. So the Gemara says it should not be read Shibarta. They are smashed, but Rivavto. He extended the teeth of the evil. What did God do? He caused that the teeth of Og should grow outward like spikes, and because they grew outward, now the mountain was wedged on his shoulders. He couldn't pull it off. As a result of it, he staggered, he fell, and he fell to his death. This is how he died. So the death of Og had nothing to do with Yisrael. It's because he made a foolish move. He wanted to destroy them, and through uprooting the mountain, he was destroyed through the mountain. So he said that we could attribute. That's not a miracle. It's an unfortunate mistake. But Sichon Melech HaMori, the Moshe killed him. Yisrael killed him. But how did he kill a giant? You're considered like, when the spies came back, we're like chagovim. We were like grasshoppers. How does such a minuscule creature stand up against such a giant? The answer is, the Jews, they have power. Physical cannot stand in their way. Regardless of the dimension of the physical, nothing is beyond their ability. Meaning, because they represent something which is unconventional. That's how, so it's Eis Kol Asher Osa Yisrael Le'amori. Og is not the issue. How did they appreciate that it wasn't conventional, but it was unconventional? Because otherwise you can't kill Og, Sichon Melech HaMori. What is Osa Yisrael Le'amori? Discussed many times that Yaakov always represents the physicality of the Jewish people. Yisrael is always the spiritual profile of the Jew. Sometimes Yaakov's children are referred to as Bnei Yaakov, and sometimes referred to as Bnei Yisrael. Yaakov himself, there are times where he speaks as Yisrael, and the times when he speaks as Yaakov. Whenever he speaks about the spiritual destiny of the Jewish people, then it's Yisrael. When he speaks as the father, the biological father of the Jewish people, something which he has to contend with something on a physical level, then it's Yaakov. Yisrael represents the spiritual aspect. Why were we able to conquer the giant? To eliminate the giant. It's not Bnei Yisrael, it's Yisrael. It's that profile of Yisrael. It's not Bnei Yisrael. Balak, the son of Tzipor, saw all that Yisrael did to Amori. It's what lies, of course, we are the Bnei Yisrael. But why were we able to do what we did? Because we're Yisrael. Because our classification, we're not a physical people. We are Yisrael. So because it lies within Yisrael, as a result of that, that's what we're able to eliminate the Amori. If that's the case, Balak, understanding this, he says, we have to resort to other methods. Of what? Of warfare. That's Bilam. Bilam, the prophet of the nations, whose power lies in his mouth, he's the one we have to commission to curse the Jews. What happened after Sichon was killed? So the Gemara tells us, and Rashi got says, and now your fear will be upon the nations of the world, the nations of Canaan. How? So the Gemara tells us that for 3 people, God stopped the sun in the middle of the sky. Yeshua, in the battle, the sun was meant to set, it did not set. So the whole world knew. And this actually brought an understanding of the power of the Jew, of Yeshua. That Yeshua is such a formidable leader, he could even dictate nature. The sun doesn't set. He stops the sun in midday. There was another Jew, his name was Nagdim Ben Gurion. And the other one was Moshe Rabbeinu. That when he destroyed Sichon, how was the world known to have an understanding of Moshe's power? The sun stopped in the middle of the sky, which was unheard, never ever happened before. Therefore, this caused the world to revere and to fear Moshe and the Jewish people. So here the Balaturim says, Vayar Balak ben Tzipor. What did he say? Shrosh Omda lo Chama lo Moshe. What did he see? See, his visual. He saw that the sun was held back because of Moshe. Vayar begematrio nokto achamo. The numerical value of Vayar is Nokta Achamo. The sun pierced. Normally it should set. It remained piercing. The rays of the sun continues to shine forth. Motzinu Rio Loshen Havono. So we see Vayar means he understood, but what level of understanding? He understood with a level of clarity, which there's no way you could delude yourself in the reality of the power of Moshe. As a result of this understanding what Moshe's power is, that nothing in the physical realm could stand in his way, therefore he resorted to commissioning Bilam, because Bilam was the prophet of the nations. Moshe is the prophet of the Jews. Bilam is the one, that's his equivalent, his equal. Vayoger Moav. Bimnei Omod Kiravu. It's interesting. The Torah usually, when it uses the term to express fear or fright, Vayira Moav. Yira is fear. Or Pachad. Vayoger Moav. What's Yoger? So Rashi says, Loshen Mora. A question is, a person is so overwhelmed with fear, he's incapacitated. It's like he's gathered in. He's gathered in because of the fear. He's frozen. He's incapacitated because of the fear. He becomes non-functional because of the fear. That's the level of fear. It was a fear which was beyond our understanding what fear was. That's what they were. Hearing, understanding what the Jews were, and what their capability is. There's a negative commandment that a judge, Jewish judge, member of the Sanhedrin or rabbinical court, the Torah says, Lo soguro mibnei ish. So literally it means you should not withhold yourself because of any man. Whatever his status may be, you have to render proper judgment. If he has to be interrogated, regardless who he is, you should not be withheld because of any man. You should not be incapacitated because of any man. So what is the word lo saguru? It's an exceptional level of fright, of fear. You should not in any way be withheld because whoever that person may be. Because God's judgment is God's. God judges. You cannot be intimidated by anybody. So it's interesting. No. To what degree does the judge have to have faith and trust in God that he cannot be to any degree affected? His objectivity cannot be in any way be undermined, regardless of who it is. As by Yoger means they were just frightened. It doesn't mean they were afraid. It was so overwhelming, it's not for us to understand. A judge, regardless of what the situation is, he cannot in any way be intimidated or affected whatsoever. The Gemara tells us one location that Yanai is known in, he became a Hellenist. He killed most of the Chachamim because he actually installed himself as the high priest. And his mother, because she was taken captive, the rabbis ruled he was not qualified. Because he was not a qualified Kohen. Because if his mother was defiled and he was born afterwards, he's not. And they opposed him. And they said, the gold plate that you wear between your eyes, you must remove. You're not qualified to be the high priest. So there's a certain other person who was a very bad person. He whispered something in his ear, and he really caused him to be enraged. He says, if that's what rabbis, we're going to kill all the rabbis. Shimon ben Shetach was his brother-in-law. He was the head of he was the leader of the Sanhedrin. And his sister was the wife of Yanai. So his sister went and sent him into hiding. To protect the brother, he shouldn't be killed. Her husband was rabid. And he killed all the rabbis, all the Torah sages. He was sent to hiding. So the Talmud, the Gemara tells us a story that Yanai's slave, Canaanite slave, committed murder. So the law is when if a person's animal, chattel, kills, the owner of the chattel must come to court. He's the equivalent of the defendant. So the Torah says when the defendant comes to court, he must stand in the presence of the court. So if a man's ox gores, the ox is judged to be stoned if it killed. So the owner of the ox is the equivalent of the defendant. He must stand in presence of the court. So the Canaanite slave who committed murder, and he's on trial to be put to death. So the Canaanite slave is the chattel of the master. Who's the master? Yanai. Yanai comes to the court, to the Sanhedrin, and he sits, he doesn't stand. And Shimon Shetach is the chief justice of the court. And he looks to the right, to the left, all his colleagues, they remain silent. And Shimon Shetach says to his brother-in-law, Yanai, and he knows what his capability is, how intimidating he is. He says, Yanai, amora raglecho, stand on your feet. Nobody's above the law. You must stand as a defendant must stand. Yanai, he looks to the right, and he looks at the judges, his colleagues. He intimidates them. They look down on the ground. They can't look him in the eye. He looks to the left, to the colleagues, to Shimon Shetach also. Shimon Shetach becomes upset. He says, God should judge you people. And it says they all died. Because you mean to say you're intimidated from the mortal in the presence of the divine? Shimon Shetach was fierce. Lo sugurim meish. It's intimidating as Yanai was. If you're connected to God properly, you're not intimidated. Lo suguru. You cannot be incapacitated for any man, whoever he is. Just to bring out what the word taguru means. Vayogar Moav. It's an expression, not just fear, just fright. It's so overwhelming, it's not to be understood. And the judge, even in that context, is not permitted to allow himself to be affected. That's his level of faith and belief he has to have when he presides as a justice on the rabbinic court. The Balaturim says, Vayogar Moav, we find the Oz Yoshir, after the splitting of the sea and it closed, the whole world knew about it. So the Balaturim says, this is the meaning of the Oz Yoshir, Ele Moav Yozemu Rod, that the powerful ones of Moav were overtaken by trembling. This is Vayogar Moav. Because of what they heard, what happened, the closing of the sea and how the Egyptian armies were destroyed, Vayogar Moav. Ele Moav Yozemi Rod. This is the meaning. So what is Rod? What happens when a person trembles? Trembling is when a person doesn't have a capacity to contain his fear. When a person is so frightened he cannot contain that level of fear, he starts trembling. It's beyond his capacity. So when a person, God forbid, becomes sick with a fever, and he starts convulsing, that means it's beyond the body's capacity. The body can't deal with the change of what's happening. So the body starts convulsing. This is trembling. This is vayogar. Again, it's to indicate the overwhelming level of fear. Over here, the Midrash tells us, Vayar Balak ben Tzipor. What is Vayar? As it's indicated from all the Midrash and all the commentators, Balak himself was one of the leading sorcerers of the world. Even a greater sorcerer than Bilam. Bilam was a sorcerer. The Midrash tells us, the Gemara tells us, that Bilam was one of the three advisors to Paro. And he advised Paro to enslave the Jews and to guarantee that they will never be able to leave Egypt. He cast a spell on Egypt that no Jew would be able to escape. There was like an invisible shield. No Jew would be able to escape from Egypt. And he said to Paro, I guarantee the Jews are here forever, because no one is able to break my spell. Okay? And he's the one who advised Paro to enslave the Jews to keep their numbers under control. So two things happened. Balak says to Bilam, the nation left Egypt. It didn't work. Supposedly, you gave a guarantee that because of your ability of sorcery, you were able to incarcerate them forever, that they could never leave. Not only did one person leave, millions of Jews left. And what you said to advise Paro to enslave them, to minimize their number, which is just to the contrary. The more they afflicted them, the more their numbers increased. Shisha bekeres echad, 6 in 1 litter every time. And vayatzmu, they were all healthy children. So whatever you said was just the opposite. So it's not as you said. Therefore, you must come immediately. Meaning, you failed in the past, you have to prove yourself. If you want to be credible, you must come. This is how the Or Chaim HaKadosh explains. So by saying this nation went out, and so on and so forth, and whatever they are, it's not the way you thought it would be, based on your capability. So sorcery is not sufficient. We have to resort to another method of limiting the Jew, vanquishing them. It's the unconventional method. Sorcery of that day was considered semi-conventional. We have to go to the unconventional. You need your power of speech, your curse, you as a prophet. You be able to eliminate them. Because sorcery is not what it takes. It's beyond sorcery. Vayar Balak ben Sipor, the Medrash tells us. Ma Vayar, what does it mean he saw? Rob Baforos Asido Lovo al Yisrael. He saw ultimately the tragedy that was going to happen to the Jews. The Sonon Hoyu Yosemite Kosoneim. He hated the Jews more than any enemy of the Jew in the history of the Jewish people. Why? Shekulam hayibon b'milchamos u'b'shibut sheyicholim amod behen. Every nation that approached the Jews in warfare, it was either through war or enslavement. War, you have casualties, but the survivors, you have captives. And the captives, what if you're the victor? So they become your slaves. There's a bondage. He's commissioning somebody here who's going to uproot a nation entirety. That there's not going to be a remnant. Gemara tells us, based on the verse that Hashem says, that he says, you realize all the days that Bilam wanted to curse you, I did not for a moment express my wrath. Because the Gemara says that God expresses his wrath for a rega. A rega is a nanosecond. And Bilam knew exactly when that moment was, when the wrath of God comes out on the world. And by saying, cursing the Jew exactly at that moment, nobody has a perfect record, the Jews would have been eliminated. God says, you should realize the chesed I did with you. All the days that Bilam wanted to curse you, even at that moment I did not get. I did not allow my wrath to be released on the world, knowing the consequence. So to what degree did Balak wanted, what level of damage did he want to the Jewish people? We're not talking about war. We're not talking about casualties. We're not talking about bondage. We're talking total elimination, total annihilation. So he says there was no enemy of the Jewish people like Balak. This was his level of hate, that he hated the Jews. Vayar Balak, Noach l'rishom she'yisumin. It would be best for the evil to be blind. Because when they see, they actually act upon what they see. She'eneim ivin me'iro l'olam. Their eyes bring a curse to the world. Because he saw, that's why he initiated Bilam, he should curse the Jews. Bedor HaMabel. What brought about the destruction of the generation of the great flood? It says, Vayiru b'nei Elohim. Uchsi vayar chom avi Canaan. He saw his grandfather lying naked and drunk, debased. His father went, shared it with his father. His father goes and sodomizes Noach, castrates Noach. So because of what Canaan saw, that initiated the tragedy that followed. But if Ham would have never seen, the tragedy wouldn't have happened. Vayir also sorry Pharaoh, when Avram went to Egypt during the famine, it says the ministers of Pharaoh, the officer of Pharaoh, saw the beauty of Sarah Imenu. Immediately, they took her to Pharaoh. She was nearly defiled. What caused Dinah to be raped? Vayar also Shechem ben Chamor. He saw, he raped her, defiled her. Vayar Balak, same thing, because he saw what followed. Once Bilam was brought into the picture, it was tragedy. Even though his curse was not effective, who's the one who suggested the story of Balpor? And ultimately, there were thousands, 24,000 casualties. This was Bilam. But what initiated it? Vayar Balak. So it would be best if the evil would be blind, how much tragedy would be prevented from being brought into existence? There's a midrash. We say, David says, Kil lam chasto, many times. Till him, he said on Shabbos and Yom Tif, in the Psukei de Zimra, L'sicho melech hamori kilo lam chasdo, log melech habashim kilo lam chasdo. Now, why did he have to say Shira? David is saying the equivalent of Shira. He's acknowledging the chesed of Hashem. So the Medrash says, really, Moshe should have said this. As after the Egyptian army was destroyed by the Yam Suf, Moshe of Israel, Shira Zos, by Yom Lema, and they said, and he articulated all aspects of what God did on our behalf. After he destroyed Sichon and Og, he should have said a Shira to articulate the Chesed Kilam Chazdo. Moshe did not. David says, what Moshe didn't do, I will. I will address it, and I will express the great Chesed of God, what he did on our behalf, that he gave us the ability to eliminate Sichon and Og. So the Midrash says, to eliminate Sichon and Og, what it took was greater than what it took to destroy Egypt with all its armies. Meaning, although they were only two giants, the battle is not a battle of physicality versus physicality. This is a representation of evil versus good. The representation of Og and Sichon in terms of the representation of impurity, what we call the nether forces, it was endlessly greater than Egypt, what Egypt represented. Even though Egypt was the bastion of impurity, witchcraft, incest, adultery, whatever it was, idolatry, Sichon and Og were more intense than that. So we see giants, seemingly. The army, the Egyptian armies, the most powerful army in the world, was destroyed. This is the ultimate. Medrash says no. It was more difficult to take out Sichon and Og than to destroy the Egyptian army. But who understood that? Moshe understood it. But if we as outsiders, seeing only superficiality, we don't appreciate it. So in reality, and that's why David says, I will say the Shira. Here, the song should have been sung even to a greater degree than what took place in Egypt. Moshe did not say the Shira. I will say the Shira. I will give the praise to God forever as his kindness, even to a greater degree what happened in Egypt. But who appreciated that? Balak understood that. Vayar Balak, what did he see? What Yisrael did to the Amori. What he did to the Amori is more frightening than what he did to Egypt. He understood that. So now it's a question, there's nothing standing in their way. Their hope was they wouldn't get beyond this point. But if they went beyond that point, There's no stopping. There's nothing could stop the Jews. Therefore, who does he send for? He sends for Bilam immediately. What does he say? V'yoma Moav el ziknei Midyan. Moab says to the elders of Midyan, Ato yilachu hakol es kol svivaseinu. This congregation will lap the whole environment around us. Kilucho chashore sier kasodeh. The way the ox, when it grazes, it uproots the greenery of the field. What exactly is saying? So Rashi explains that when a sheep grazes, a goat grazes, it's only surface. When the ox grazes, it uproots it from the root. Wherever it grazes, after that, nothing grows. There's no blessing after that. It becomes desolate. It's desolation. Now, over here, Vayar Balak, just to bring out a point, as the Medrash says, the hate that Balak had for the Jews surpasses anything. Because the method that he wanted to harm the Jews was total destruction. As he said, there's war, there's conquest, there's bondage, slavery, enslavement. Balak was to uproot the nation totally. He says, what is the name Balak? So he says, Ba Loluk Domachel Yisrael. It's a conjunction. Ba Loluk. He wanted to lap the blood of the Jewish people. They should be destroyed, that he should be able to lap at that blood, to lick at that blood, to that degree. So if that is the intensity of hate, so of course, let them be eliminated. Cosby Bastur, the story with the Balpor, where the Jews, they went and they were involved in idolatry and in this impropriety, this promiscuity, but who led it? Right? It was Cosby. It was Balak's daughter. It was his daughter. She's a princess. You mean you give your daughter over to be defiled? I mean, who gives his daughter over? It's a total degradation. You're a princess you give over to Zimri. Well, if that's going to destroy the Jews, whatever it takes. To what degree, what level was his hate? It was rabid hate. He was totally consumed by this hate. Balak Loluk Damashel Yisrael. Literally, he wanted to lap the blood of the Jewish people. So what does it mean to give your daughter? I want total elimination here. They should be eliminated, totally removed from existence. So over here it says, why did he compare it to the ox? Mashor komashum lachechem mutzim ebrocha. Cites Rashi, what Rashi cites. Af elu kol uma shenogim bo ein ben sim ebrocha. Any nation who engages with them, it's over. There's no bracha for that nation. Now this is the conclusion. A mashor medagech bekarnov. An ox, when it gores, what does it gore with? Its horns. Af elu menagchim betfilosam. The Jewish people, when we gore with our prayer. We have a special connection. This is Akol Kol Yaakov. Even Balak, they understood what the power of the Jew is. It's not only, God forbid, the Jew has the power to curse. We have a power of supplication. Tefillah is something positive. Always mentioned, the Gemara tells us in one location, in Soto, that we find Goliath, the Philistine, the giant. So we read in prophets that for 40 days, in the morning and the evening, he would go out publicly and blaspheme God. This is what he would do. And you can imagine the way his voice, the way it bellowed. It was booming voice. He was a giant. The Jews were terrified. David comes after 40 days, takes a slingshot. Miraculously, he kills Goliath the giant. So the Gemara asks, why does it say he would come and blaspheme God? Baboka uberif, in the morning and the evening. So the Talmud says, Goliath, this evil man, he understood what the value of Kriya Shema is. When a Jew declares his belief in God by saying Shema, and he becomes totally subservient to God, the value of that has infinite worth. So by putting him in this fearful state during this period of time, they're not going to have the capacity to say the Shema. Because he appreciated and understood how powerful the Shema is if the Jew says the Shema properly. If the Jew is focused when he says the Shema. That's interesting. What Goliath understood, we should only understand. To have that level of appreciation, what its value is. What is it? Why are we compared to the ox? As the ox, when it enters into battle, this is Balak talking, and Moab. What does it fight with? With its horns. The Jews, how do they gore? They gore with their tefillah. You understand how the Gentile, the rabid anti-Semite, appreciates, understands the power of tefillah more than we appreciate its power. If we would only appreciate what we have, we'd be fully focused. We wouldn't be distracted with other things. Rabbi, you should be happy I pray once a day. 3 times a day I should pray. Who are you praying for? Are you praying for God or are you praying for yourself? God doesn't have to listen to you. You think he wants to hear what you have to say? He's doing for you, it's all for you. But it's only because the Jew thinks this way, he doesn't understand the power of tefillah, what Kol Yaakov is, what the essence of the Jew is. But the Gentile, they gore with their tefillah. We find that finally, when he's going to curse the Jews, it says, he rises in the morning and he hitches his donkey. So the Midrash asks, Bilam was a world-renowned minister. He was a leader, a man of, and he would not talk about, he's a youngster. If the Jews spent 210 years in Egypt, and the bondage was an extended period of time, and he was an advisor to Paro, how old is he today? We're talking about a man who must be 200 years old. When he goes to curse the Jews, he hitches his own donkey. We see how pompous and how self-centered he was. A man of his status, of the way he perceived himself. Ruchel Gevoa. He was arrogant, haughty. He should hitch his own. He didn't have a slave. He didn't have a maidservant. It's because the overwhelming hate which he hated the Jews. This I will tend to myself. He was consumed. This is how Sinukum Akalkelis is Ashura. I will do this with alacrity. I will do it myself. Omadar Kodesh Baruch Hu, Hashem says to Bilam, Rasha, evil one. You think your accomplishment is, you're displaying something so special? The forefather of the Jewish people, Avram, he preceded you that he hitched his own donkey to go take his son as a sacrifice. Shemar, vayashkim Avram baboker, vayachvu sheschamoro. So I asked, Bilam is rising early to do something contrary to the will of God. God says, don't go. He rises early to curse the Jews. So God says, do you think you're accomplishing something special? The forefather of the Jewish people, Avram, he rose early to do my will, and he hitched his donkey to sacrifice his son. I mean, what relevance is this? The man's going to perpetrate evil, something which is contrary to God's will. Does this even need a response? He should have been reprimanded. Do you think you're so great? You rose early and you humbled yourself. Avram, the forefathers Jews, he rose early, to hitch his donkey to do my will. What does one thing have to do with another? What exactly did Bilam want to display? So evidently there was an intent. The level of evil of Bilam was not to be understood. Bilam wanted to bring prosecution on the Jewish people. But I'm just bringing it out to another level. We all have inborn characteristics. A person is motivated for what? In what area? Where your interests lie. Where your interests lie, we're motivated. For instance, the Ramban, Nachmanides writes, the Torah tells us, based on some verse, that if you have a conflict between a negative and positive commandment, and you're not able to reconcile both, so the principle is, the Talmud tells us, the positive commandment supersedes the negative commandment. Aseh do chalos aseh. The positive overrides the negative. So Ramban explains what is the philosophical principle of the positive supersedes the negative. When God says don't do something, what is that? That's refrain. Don't wear shatnez. Don't eat not kosher. That's refrain. To refrain from something, what does it take? What would be the basis to refrain? Fear, reverence. To take initiative, to be proactive, it takes more than being passive. That you need love. A person who loves, that's motivating. Love is a motivating factor. So we have two mitzvos. We have Avas Hashem, we have Yiras Hashem. Avas Hashem surpasses Yiras Hashem. Love is greater than reverence and fear. So if you have a conflict between the positive, which is love, and the negative, which is a display of your reverence or fear, love supersedes the negative. Okay? That's what it is. We're all motivated in the area that where our love lies. You live for the material, nothing's too difficult. You live for the spiritual, nothing's too difficult. But if you live for the material and you have to engage in the spiritual, everything's too difficult. It's too overwhelming. I've done enough. Because the love, it's lacking in love. But if the love would be internalized, not only conceptual, there's nothing too difficult. We're motivated. So every human being is born with internal, intrinsic inclinations and ability. We all have the ability to do things with zeal and alacrity. So Bilam wanted to bring prosecution to Jewish people, he says. A man of my stature, of my prominence, of my age, even though I'm doing something contrary to your will, to denigrate himself and belittle himself, to hitch his own donkey, has the characteristic of zeal and alacrity, has ever been expressed by a Jew to do your will. I'm able to express it in negative. Has the Jew ever expressed it in the positive? God says, the forefather of the Jewish people, Avram, he already preceded you. He's expressed it. To bring his son as a sacrifice. Therefore, this silence is your criticism. This silence is your prosecution. But let's understand the difference. The Akedah was the most difficult of the tests. God promises him, you will have a son, stars of the heaven, the future of the world, future patriarch, there'll be a Jewish people, a holy people, princely people, everything. At the age of 37, God says to Avram, bring him up as a sacrifice. Not as simple. The child that was born to you in your old age, who you love, and so on and so forth. Vayashkem Avram baboker. Vayachbush es chamoro. What is he rising to do what? To do the will of God and what? And who's he sacrificing? Something that he loves more than anything. But so what was that, a display? That his love for God supersedes the love for what? For his son. Bilam rising early. What does that display? It displays that he's rising for exactly what he wants to do, to destroy the Jewish people. So it's not only that Avram had preceded you by expressing this characteristic, it's at a different level. Here it's love superseding love. There it's purely for self-interest. Why am I rising early? In what context is this characteristic manifesting itself? To destroy the Jews. They don't deserve to exist. So of course you rise early. What are you showing? You show nothing. You know what's considered a display of specialness? When you take the characteristic of zeal and alacrity, despite your age and your wealth and your prominence, you rise early and to do something which would be contrary to what you want to do. And you display that your love for God supersedes the love for what's most special to you. The son that was born to you in your old age, it's a different level. Totally different level. It's interesting, the Gemara tells us, Altia birchas hedyu kal beinecha, that even the blessing of an ordinary person, you should not take lightly. A person gives you a blessing, even an ordinary person. You should value the blessing. Do not minimize it. Altia birchas hedyu, even an ordinary person, kal beinecha, don't take it lightly. But what about somebody who's evil? The person has no relevance to blessing. It's coming from a source of not goodness, of evil. Balak says to Bilam, what you bless is blessed, and what you curse is cursed. What he curses is cursed, that we understand. The man personifies evil. Mirashom yitzi resha. From evil, evil breeds evil. Okay, so that makes sense. But isha shetvorech mavorech. What you bless is blessed. And the Midrash tells us that initially, how did Balak become the king of Moab? Because Bilam had given the blessing that he will ascend to be king. Do you see? His blessing is a blessing. But he was evil. How could blessing emanate from such an evil man? So the Ohr HaChaim HaKodesh says, V'nira kilolam birchas Bilam kibirchas chamor. The blessing of Bilam was no better than the blessing of a donkey. You put a tape recorder in a donkey's mouth, as if the donkey is giving a blessing. What's its value? There's no value. What relevance does a donkey have to blessing? The man was a charlatan. He was an expert stargazer. So he was able to read the stars. So when he saw the stars were forecasting that a person is going to rise to a position of prominence and power, he goes to the person and says, you know something? I will give you a blessing. But the blessing he's giving him is unrelated to the blessing. He's only telling him what he saw in the stars. But it's a deception to the person. Asher tevorach mevorach. So he was misled. Balak was misled in terms of the blessing. He has no relevance to blessing. But you understand, to Balak, factually, I did become the king. So if you become the king, what do you attribute the blessing to? Of course, it must be Bilam. He has the power to bless. So of course, the obvious question is, if you have the power to bless, which is a question, so what do you have to, why am I commissioning you to curse the Jews? I should commission you to give us a blessing, that we should be protected from the Jews. That he didn't do. So you have to say similar what the Medrash says, because Balak himself was not too far behind Bilam. His hate for against the Jews was a runner-upper to Bilam. In the history, nobody ever wanted to eliminate us the way Balak wanted to eliminate us, together with Bilam. Therefore, rather than asking to be blessed, they should be cursed. I mean, I should let them infringe on me. I have to be blessed to be protected. Let them better not exist. That's the rabid anti-Semite. God comes to Bilam and he says to him, who is this person with you? So he says, V'yoma Bilam el Elokim, Balak ben Tzipor melech Moab sholach elai. Balak, the son of Tzipor, the king of Moab, sent that's who these people are. So Rashi cites the Midrash as something which seemingly is not understandable. Bilam knows he's speaking to God. Balak ben Sipor, he says, Melech. Aval pi she'eni choshev beinecho. Also, although I have no value in your eyes, choshev ani beinei hamlochim. But in the eyes of the kings, I have prominence. Could you even understand this? Bilam knows he's speaking to God. God is the Almighty. He's the all-powerful. You pride yourself that you're a prophet. You're the prophet of the nations. Although you don't value me, but you realize, but the kings of the world value me. Even though you don't value me. I mean, this is unheard of. Do you speak to God this way? You want to think something in your heart and say something differently in your mouth. You say, maybe God doesn't know my thoughts, doesn't know my feelings. But here, he's verbalizing it. Although you don't value me, the world values me. You know, a person is incarcerated, in prison. Every subhuman being thinks this man is outstanding. But society sees him as a pervert, a disgrace to humanity. But you know, it's okay what society doesn't value me. But my fellow inmates, they value me. Is that what to talk about? I mean, the whole thing is ludicrous. But here you speak to God. Although you don't value me, but kings value me. What exactly is he saying over here? It's insanity. So I think what he's saying is this. He says to Hashem, why were the Avos HaKadoshim so special? Before Avram came on the scene, God was an unknown entity in the world. Who introduced God to the world? Avram. Avram is special. Why is Avram special? Because Avram validated God to humanity. He brought monotheism to humanity. Therefore, Avram is Elokei Avram. God says, you know who I am. What do you mean, who am I? He's the infinite being. God created the universe. But do you know who I am? I am Elokei Avram. I pride myself. I am the God of Avram. You, the creator, have to pride yourself. You're the God of a mortal. Someone who has limitation. But who is Avram? Avram established me in this world. He gave meaning to existence. Bilam says to God, you may not value me, but you don't know my real value. Kings value me, but why do kings value him? Because he's a prophet of God. That's what he's saying to God. It's like a left-handed compliment here. That's my value. You don't value me because whatever my deficiencies may be. That's between you and me. But versus humanity, because of their limitation, how do they see me? Because of me, you're extolled in their eyes. That's what he's trying to say to Hashem. Although it's not true. They're just playing along with him. Do what we want. We'll give you all the gold and silver you want. But what? You commit bestiality. We know what you are. You're a disgrace to humanity. But as long as we could use you, we'll use you. When we don't want to know you, we don't want to know you. That was the reality of Bilam. He was a disgrace to humanity. Just like that with one Siforno. Hashem says to Bilam, Vayomer Elokim el Bilam lo sei lechim hoim. Do not go with these people. Lo se'ores ha'om. Don't curse them, ki voruchu, because they're blessed. So over here, what does it mean don't go with them? He should say, don't curse them, don't bless them. What is the going? So the Siforno says, Afal pi shlo tekaleim. Although you're not going to curse them, lo safely shouldn't go. Kedei shlo titein einecho behem l'ra. You may not curse them, but you have such an evil eye. By allowing your eyes to set upon them, that will cause, that is the equivalent of a curse. That's why I don't want you to go. When they look at the Jew is one thing, but when you look at the Jew, it's a different level of damage. Ke'inyon omrom, and he cites a Gemara, which is difficult. Nosen einav bo v'nasa gal shel atzomos. This is referring to a tzaddik. It says he looked upon him and he became a heap of bones. But look upon an evil person, he became a heap of bones. Chas v'sholom, God forbid, what, an Amora? Various Rav Shimon Yochai looked at a person and became a heap of bones. Or other great holy Chachamim. They looked upon and became a heap of bones. This emanated from what? This emanated from what? From any trace, even on a microscopic level of evil, Chas v'sholom. That was from the Kedusha. By Bilam, when he would look at something, it would immediately disintegrate and be vaporized because of his evil. So what the Sefirah doesn't mean that. Chas v'sholom doesn't mean to compare. Just as over there, we are looking where it's contrary to Kedusha. It vaporizes it because they cannot coexist. You're so evil, nothing coexists with your evilness. Therefore, when you look at something, the end result is the same. But you take Kedusha and destroy it, they take evil and they destroy it through their vision, which is a holy vision.